Guitarist magazine, and I'm very delighted to be here on the Taylor booth with Andy once again, and playing some lovely guitars. So,
yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, we're having a little jam there.
Yeah,
should we have a little?
Let's do it. I like the playing part.
Cool. Nice gentle halt like a train coming into the station. So
yeah, man.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to jam with you, Andy.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
Tell us about these guitars. We were speaking earlier on. You were saying they're kind of almost like a complementary pair in some respects.
Yeah, it is. So, really, these are two instruments of what we're now calling a Builder's Edition collection.
Yeah.
Now, that whole idea started a few years ago when we were looking at introducing the V-Class idea as an internal architecture for the guitar. Because what I was taken with is this notion that our goal is to build a better instrument to serve the musical needs of a player.
Sure.
I want to contribute to their music-making artistry and give them something that sounds great, feels great, plays great, something that's approachable and appealing as a voice to use. So we had come up with this guitar that, in fact, this was this 324 model was one of the very first ideas that I had. So this was the guitar that I first built in this beveled the combination of this beveled armrest and beveled contour cutaway, the chamfered off edges, the silent satin finish. It was meant as like this very player-centric type guitar. Now that idea ended up expanding outward into the K14 guitar that we launched in the 614 Builder's Edition, last year's Grand Pacific guitars. And this year, that whole narrative is expanding even further with the guitar that you've got there, which is a 912.
Yeah.
So it's our smaller grand concert body size, built with East Indian rosewood and Lutz spruce. Now for me, that instrument, it has this unique identity in that it's a super, super balanced response. It's ultra fast, kind of a quick transient response, but it's incredibly linear in the type of notes that you play. So for a fingerstyle guitar player, or even an electric guitar player who's looking for an acoustic guitar, that kind of voice is uniquely appealing.
Yeah.
So you combine that with these unique kind of ergonomic features. It's a guitar that you can get around with a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because with the fingerstyle, you want some precision and some articulation, but you don't want it to be so unforgiving that it's actually not much fun to play.
Yeah.
So there's a real kind of nice feel of that with these instruments. I mean, you touched on it earlier on. How much of a factor in your design process is tactility and the kind of the actual interface with the instrument that the player has?
Well, it's very important. I mean, really, when we listen to a guitar, you're never hearing just the guitar.
Yeah.
You're hearing, it sounds esoteric, but you're hearing the relationship between the musician and their instrument.
Sure.
You know, so that's everything from the way that their hands fall on the instrument, the type of touch they bring to it, how comfortable they are. You know, how much agility they have with the instrument.
Sure.
All of those things go into what that guitar actually sounds like as music's coming out of it.
Yeah.
So I like to think about those elements of like, how does it feel against your arm? How do the edges strike you? How does the neck feel in your hand? How are the fingerboard edges treated?
Yeah.
All of those details matter.
Yeah. Let's broaden the conversation a bit about the Builder's Edition stuff and talk about Grand Pacific briefly, and then perhaps we'll take a little bit of a closer look at that guitar, because I know you were keen to point out some interesting features of its tone woods. So, Grand Pacific, tell me about the iterations of that whole design line in Builder's Edition this year.
Okay, so with the Grand Pacific, we're continuing to build that 517 and 717 that we had introduced last year. And what's so unique about that idea, it was one of the early promises of the V-Class architecture. Sure, we can make a guitar that builds what you'd think of as a characteristic Taylor guitar sound.
Yeah.
But that design allows us to adapt into so many different kinds of sound. That's one of the hallmarks of these Builder's Edition collection guitars. Each one turned into a unique individual. So with the Grand Pacific guitar, you saw it adopt this almost older, more mature characteristic.
Sure.
Now, like if I were to describe notes as having a shape, to picture them or visualize them, this Grand Auditorium guitar has piano-like or triangular shaped notes.
Mm-hmm.
That Grand Pacific guitar has notes that are shaped more like a bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
They're very broad and wide.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these other instruments, like the new 816 guitar with the ported semi-Florentine cutaway, that's like taking that bell curve shaped note and turning it upside down.
Yeah.
It turns into this broadly lyrical, almost like an opera singer of guitars.
Yeah.
This 912 guitar has this incredibly linear, ultra precise and articulate voice. Each one of these instruments have a really unique musical identity to fit different contexts. Now, we don't all play the same, we don't all listen the same. We want different guitars and different styles.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because the different guitars will speak to a player, and I'm a fingerstyle player primarily, but obviously it's kind of fun to throw in those chords that you do with the sort of front of your nail.
Yeah,
so
like the almost Rosciano kind of thing.
Yeah. So I mean, and this does that wonderfully because it's quite fast as well.
It feels to me almost like an electric guitar in terms of its balance.
Yeah.
Like you'll notice if you're playing arpeggios or scales up and down the fingerboard, you won't even have a much of a difference between the sound that comes out of the wound strings versus the plain strings. It's so uniformly balanced.
And that's one of the things I really liked about the V-Class bracing, is that actually that sense of balance and poise is really kind of built into that kind of concept.
Yeah, they're super functional.
So one of the things that Taylor is very commendably brilliant at is innovating in the use of sustainable tone woods, and that's a very wide-ranging program. And I know that those kind of features are throughout the range, but you mentioned earlier that this particular guitar has some interest.
This one is really interesting because, like you point out, we're very interested in not just preserving our resources and kind of encouraging them, in some cases propagating them for future generations of instrument. We want to leave our forests in better condition than we found them. One of the factors that you see with a lot of those projects, they're very forward-thinking. So you hear stories like in 20 years, in 30 years, in 100 years. Well, this particular guitar is bringing a new element into that conversation. The back end sides of this guitar are actually made of wood we've sourced from what we call an urban forest. Okay, so if you've ever been in an airplane coming in for a landing, and you look around a big city, have you ever noticed how green it is?
Yeah.
Like shockingly green for what you would think of as an urban environment. Well, the reality is, in every city around the world, there's a standing inventory of trees that have been planted for specific reasons. Sometimes it's noise barriers or visual barriers, windbreaks maybe for the cooling, the shade effect. And so if you look at every city and were to mentally erase the buildings, what you're left with is a forest that was planted, propagated, maintained, full of trees. Unlike a natural forest, these trees do actually reach a very definitive end of life.
Right.
They get to a size where a storm might topple them.
Yeah.
Or they're in danger of falling on cars or people or buildings or things like that. So every city is maintaining this inventory of trees. Well, typically, when they take those trees out, they're lost.
Right.
They're turned into mulch, they're turned into firewood,
Right.
they're thrown away.
Yeah.
Now, Bob Taylor and Scott Paul and I, we kind of had some parallel thought a number of years ago in looking at that and going, well, wait a minute, maybe we could use this. What's right here in our own backyard that could potentially be used for a guitar? It's kind of working like the way a violin maker would have 300 years ago.
Yeah.
You look at what's immediately around you and go, that's what I have to work with.
Yeah.
So the back and sides of this guitar are made of a wood called urban ash or chamois ash
Okay.
that was propagated here back a number of years ago, kind of end of World War II, early 1950s kind of era. And these trees were grown largely for their aesthetic value, for the shade and whatnot, but they grow to immense size and start to fall over.
Right.
So we started working with this company called West Coast Arborist, who maintain all the city trees in
Yeah.
every city in California. Well, they're a forward-thinking arborist who's looking at this going, wait a minute, there is a value here. Surely something could be done with this past just mulch or firewood.
Yeah.
Some of these turns out they're brilliant tone woods. So this one in particular I'm really thrilled with because it's right in the realm of what a guitar wood should be.
Yeah.
You know, it's that dimensional stability, saws well, planes well, glues well, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It's like that Goldilocks, the just right size.
Right.
And so we've started utilizing that resource as an addition to our forestry initiatives, going, hey, there are more places that we can look than just this.
Yes.
We can look right around us and see the forest for the trees that they are.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you hear reports that instrument grade Sitka is becoming hard to find without kind of trekking off into natural wilderness, which you don't want to be kind of eating into that if there is alternatives that are really interesting.
Yeah, and so I mean, it won't take the place of every wood, but it's an addition to the conversation to go, hey, why not?
Yeah.
This is another arrow in the quiver. Oh, this wood happens to sound amazing. It works well, and it's right here.
Yeah.
It's already been maintained. It's already been propagated. Now, I'm certainly not going to go walking down the street cutting down every tree you see, but you have the ability to say, hey, I know that tree will come down at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's 10 years from now. In this case, these ash trees often are infested with a borer beetle over the last several years, so a lot of them are being taken out currently.
Yeah.
But you look at that and think, I could make a better use out of that resource. We could make something of lasting value rather than simply let that tree be lost.
Yeah, well, yeah, which is that's obvious, obviously a benefit, and just in terms of its characteristics, as against known benchmarks like a Sitka or whatever the analog might be for that. What is this close to? It's not.
This one is about the closest wood I've seen to the mahogany that we love.
Yeah.
And it's not coincidental. It originated kind of in Central America, and it's known as an evergreen ash, where it's just continuously growing in this environment all year round, kind of similar to the mahogany that we love.
Yeah.
And so when we sampled that, it was kind of like going to a farmer's market or something. You look through and go, yeah, maybe I'll try some of this and some of that. Let me just learn about some of these species that I'm surrounded with that I've never worked with before. This one is like, it's right in the wheelhouse of a guitar maker.
Yeah.
It's got all those characteristics that we love about mahogany, and has its own unique sparkle, its own sonic flavor that's really appealing.
So actually, it's not a case of simply wanting to use a resource that's utilized just for the sake of using up that. It's got a real genuine musical kind of
it's got its own musical personality that's super appealing. It makes a beautiful sound. Because every one of these trees, they all have their own unique set of characteristics. I mean, you could measure it in a million different ways. You'd look at, of course, density. You look at, the grain structure. You look at its dimensional stability. But you also look at, like, the way that energy would distribute throughout the piece of wood as it starts vibrating. What's absorbed? What's its mechanical impedance like? What's its resonance characteristics like? There's a lot of different factors. And when you put all of those parameters together, you end up with this unique identity out of every stick of wood. So this one, fortunate for us, has an amazingly appealing musical quality.
And the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. And
Yeah,
we were
absolutely.
as we heard just then, it sounded absolutely great. So,
Thank you.
should we have another little jam to play us out, and then
Yeah.